The Impact of Emergency Distance Learning on the Library, brought to you jointly by my good friends at the Library Journal and Ex Libris. I added the word emergency because I wanted to highlight the frantic speed of it all. And that's why I changed the title. I'm Bob Banerjee, part of the marketing team here at Ex Libris in North America, and I'll be your moderator. But before I introduce my panel, I'd like to invite Eric Hines, who's president of Ex Libris North America, to set the stage. Eric?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. So good afternoon, good morning to everybody, and welcome to this webinar, and many thanks to the production support from our good friends at the Library Journal. In the past, we've used these webinars to introduce new products or to discuss advanced topics that support our mission, but today our goal is a bit different. We really want to facilitate a discussion about the impact of this awful pandemic has had on our community and bring together different perspectives from representative institutions. So as we sit here alone with our families, with our pets, dogs, and cats, we embrace the fact that we're all in this together. And while much of our investment continues to be with our current teams and universities, it is important to stay connected at the wider community. With travel and library events mostly at a standstill, these meetings are really focused to continue to press forward and to maintain our momentum. This webinar has a record number of registrants. I think there's nearly 4,000 folks that registered for this webinar, so thank you for joining us. And please share this recording with your colleagues and friends if you get a chance. I've had the chance over the past several weeks to speak with many leaders from different schools lately, and most of them share many common challenges of supporting distance learning. And today our panel will share with us some of their stories with all of you. Ex Libris, of course, is not immune to these changes, and we've spent the last several weeks working on multiple initiatives to support the libraries in this new environment. And some of the projects include the opening of a free-to-join resource-sharing pod in Rapid ILL for libraries looking for additional e-resources, and also making our Campus M platform available to provide schools a mobile communication platform during this time for their students. So following this webinar, you'll receive an email with a link to some of these initiatives. I encourage you to take a look if you have a chance, and feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. In the meantime, I also wanted to thank our volunteer specialist, and especially our host, Dr. Bob Banerjee, for pulling this all together. And on a personal note, I'm experiencing, much like we all are, this distance learning. I have 4 students here at home, including grade school, junior high, high school, and college. So I'm a little bit empathetic to all of our challenges here, as my personal day now includes long and short vowels, photosynthesis, respiration, and all the way up to changing ideologies in communist Russia in the 1860s from the book Crime and Punishment. So with that, thank you all for joining. This should be a fantastic webinar, and thank you to the panelists so much for entertaining us over the next hour or so. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Eric. Much appreciated. Recently, we've all had to scramble like we've never seen before. This panel is no different, but they would like to share with you some of the things that they and their organizations did long ago in anticipation of a world where there are more and more remote students, just in case it triggers any ideas for you moving forwards. They're going to share what they've learned and how they think a return to the physical campus will look like. Actually, you know what? It's a 3-slide PowerPoint. It's really short. My distinguished guests are Danuta, Elijah, Dennis, and Tim. I'll let them introduce themselves so that you can hear their voices. Danuta.
Hi, this is Danuta Yateski from Philadelphia, Center City, at Drexel University Libraries.
Excellent. And tell us a little bit about yourself, Danuta.
Oh, so the slide is up or not? I have been here now over just about a decade, and I'm rather excited with the challenges that we have and just trying to redefine the libraries for this new period. And our current crisis is just giving us different ways of looking at it. Prior to this, my career has been in large research universities, and I've worked with consortium and various other organizations before that.
From Pennsylvania down to Florida, Elijah.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Elijah Scott, and I'm the Executive Director for the Florida Academic Library Services Cooperative. FALSC is a library consortium in the state of Florida. We service the 40 public colleges and universities across the state of Florida. I've been working at FALSC just over 3.5 years, and prior to that, I've worked in college and university libraries for over 20 years. Thank you for having me on the panel this afternoon.
Excellent. Thank you. North Carolina. Dennis.
Hi, Dennis Swanson. I'm the Dean of Library Services at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. Just getting ready to start my 5th year. I was at another library in California for about 24 years before that, and was an LA policeman for 15 years before that, so I've gotten around the country a bit. Part of the University of North Carolina system, one of the 17 institutions there, and glad to be here and glad to have this opportunity to share with you.
Thank you for your service, Dennis. And back up to New York State, Tim.
Hi, everyone. My name's Timothy Jackson. I am the Resource Sharing and Fulfillment Program Manager for SUNY Library Shared Services. I'm currently located just south of Albany, New York. I'm right on the Hudson River, about 120 miles north of New York City. I've been in this role for about a year now. And prior to taking this position, I was at the University at Albany, which is one of SUNY's main research centers, for nearly 20 years, where I initially started off opening up the mail in the interlibrary loan department and gradually worked my way up to assistant head of access services. And thank you, Bob, for inviting me to participate in this today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Tim. Right, let's get straight into the question. I'm Bob Banerjee. I'm Director of Marketing over here at Ex Libris, and that's me. Let's focus on the panel. Okay, Danuta, why don't you take this one first? Emergency remote teaching and learning. I think it was either NASPA or EDUCAUSE that called it emergency remote teaching and learning rather than just remote teaching. What proactive steps did you and the team take before all of this happened, and how did they help? Take us through that.
Okay, thanks a lot, Bob, and also to so many of you who have taken time to join us today. So as at all academic libraries at Drexel, we continued as we entered this cataclysm to focus on our primary responsibilities, to ensure access to authoritative information, to build informal learning environments, both in physical and cyberspaces, and to strengthen our institution's connections to scholarship. So 3 earlier proactive steps have engaged relatively easily the library support for remote teaching and learning. So first, during the past 2 decades, the libraries here at Drexel have moved away from a collection building approach, purchasing and housing physical materials in proximity to where our clients came to us. We gravitated to increasingly licensed, prioritized access to resources most needed for teaching and learning, to provide students online access to readings from wherever they were. Second, with a long and innovative Drexel University history of online education, primarily for graduate courses and adult learners, we've evolved delivery of the library's support through hybrid venues, both on campus, within library facilities, and in classrooms and labs, as well as through websites, online chats, Zoom sessions, emails, and Blackboard and other learning management systems used on campus. We have done this for access to information resources by spending well over 97% of our acquisition budget on licensing, resource sharing agreements, and systems, by creating customized learning objects in partnership with faculty, and by embedding discipline-specific lab guides, individual consultations, and interactive class sections to help students navigate and use resources across their curriculum. And third, Drexel Libraries is a rather lean organization compared to most of our recent peers in other R1 research institutions. To meet new expectations that come with such university changes, we have evolved an organization that has been moving away from a hierarchical structure for the past decade. The transformation began with the divisions that reflected traditional groups of staffing that were either building partnerships with academic units for client-facing educational services or technical operations that focused on improving customer service and efficiencies of workflows. Over a couple realignments, we've regrouped staff expertise in what we think of as a more matrixed organization, extending both customer relationships as well as lean operations to address those university challenges where the library's professionalism, expertise, values, and resources can offer most unique contributions. So set in 2017, our current strategic directions have guided us in focusing on how the libraries can uniquely help Drexel contain the rising cost of higher education, shape future research, and inspire a lifelong quest for learning. So, for example, few others on campus understand the publishing landscape and changes in the industries as librarians do to cost-effectively manage institutional funds to ensure access to scholarly output. The libraries has actively examined and designed different and unique informal learning environments on campus with self-directed learning affordances that include proximity to people, equipment, furnishings, and information resources to encourage active learning behaviors. And now we're trying to figure out how to translate that online. Together, these strategies have prepared us to continue to support remote teaching and learning. And so we're right in the midst of it as we speak.
Thanks very much, Dina. Much appreciated. Elijah, down from Florida for FALSC, what can you add to that?
Yes, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak to the group today. So in Florida, FALSC works with the 28 public colleges and the 12 public universities across the state of Florida. We're a support consortium. We provide library resources and information support services for these institutions. So we're working with more than 150 library locations, serving 1.3 million students, faculty, and staff across the state of Florida. Of course, as in most states, our public institutions have been building out really robust online learning programs for many years. At FALSC, we have really placed an emphasis on developing collections and services that support those online programs as well as the on-campus programs. So within FALSC, we provide the integrated library system that is used by all 40 institutions. We're currently using the Ex Libris Olive system, which has been in place for many years, providing one single ILS that's used by all 40 institutions. And this includes a statewide union catalog. We also use the system to support a courier service and delivery service. In addition, we provide a robust collection of databases, ebooks, and other electronic resources. We also provide documentation and training that enables library faculty and staff, as well as students, excuse me, to maximize the utility and value of those resources, specifically in the online learning environment. This is a bit of a challenge for us because even though we're serving two systems, the state university system and the Florida college system, different institutions have different learning management systems. So we have to be sure that we've made all of our resources available and accessible in all of those systems. We also provide a robust authentication platform for all of those electronic resources and a help desk service in order to rapidly respond to any interruption in those services or in those resources. Specifically, the actions that we've taken in the past several years that have really helped us respond rapidly to, as Bob has very accurately described it, this emergency remote teaching and learning environment. It's Florida, and we have these little things called hurricanes, and they blow in pretty regularly. So within FALSC, we've taken extraordinary efforts over the past several years to develop a really robust hurricane master plan. We review this master plan twice annually, both at the start of hurricane season and then again at the end of hurricane season, to identify areas where we need to update or change the plan. It turns out that this plan has worked really well for us in this period of pandemic. It's given us all the steps that we needed to take to very quickly move our operations to remote operations where all of our staff are working from home. We've had no interruptions in services or the resources that we provide because we have this very robust plan in place. And it's really important that we maintain these services and these resources intact because, of course, all of our institutions have shifted rapidly to remote teaching and learning for the duration of the spring semester. And we're seeing that all of them, but maybe one or two, are going to continue with remote learning and teaching for the duration of the summer semester. That means we have to be sure that all of these resources and services are running without interruption because they're even more important now that all of our students are working remotely. I wouldn't have thought that a hurricane master plan would be extraordinarily useful in the case of a worldwide pandemic, but that has proven to be the case. So that's how we're responding. And again, we're a little bit different than the frontline library because we're a support institution working kind of behind the scenes. We don't work directly with students, but we work directly with the librarians and library staff at these institutions. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that they have access to these resources and services so that they can best serve their students.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Elijah. Dennis, you've been at UNCP for a few years leading up to this event. What did you and the team put in place anticipating a world like this?
Well, I don't know if anyone can anticipate something of this magnitude. Like I said, we have hurricanes also up here in North Carolina, and I guess my 15 years in the police department, and I was on the LAPD during the '84 Olympics. I'm just inclined to think in terms of preparation. What could possibly happen, and then how can we mitigate that? And we had already been working through adding ebooks, making our collection a little bit more agile in terms of online access. We fortunately for us, this occurred right at our spring break, and so we extended spring break and kind of got everything converted right away. We had already integrated Alma and Primo in 2018, and then last fall we began to slowly implement Leganto. So we had a reading solution in place, and I had all of our librarians and probably about 25 faculty members using it in the fall, and they were able to come alongside their colleagues and help them integrate that into their new online courses that they had to do. I think that part of the whole issue has just been trying to stay a step ahead. We were already moving towards online and expanding in that area. We're a regional university. Pembroke, North Carolina is not the metropolitan hub of the world. So we're a little remote, and so we have to be a little bit more able to deliver our product, education, beyond the confines of the campus, and be able to do it in such a way that students who may not have the most robust online abilities at their homes or wherever they're living to be able to work with that. And so we've developed some partnerships on campus. We've worked closely with our other colleges in the institution, working with our IT department, and also really just kind of wandering around. Sometimes I manage by wandering around and asking students just, how is this working for you? And we've been doing that for a while here and getting that kind of input. It's amazing what students will tell you when they're just sitting at a desk in the library trying to work on something on their computer. You can have fascinating conversations, and really that's the way to find out what's happening in a place, I think. So we've been successful. We had some things in place. We had web chat for reference questions, but we had added WebEx capabilities because all of you who've worked a reference desk, you know that typing things and sometimes they're going to leave things out. It's much better if they can just have a good conversation with someone in the library, looking at somebody face to face, even if it's on a screen. And that's been very successful. Since most of my staff is working at home, we're able to run reference chat and online reference. I think we're running till 11 or 12 o'clock at night every night still.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. Tim, over to you in upstate New York, well, actually the whole of New York. You've got a huge geography to cover, just like Elijah does in Florida. And you also have a forward-thinking, was it the governor who invested heavily in OER content recently?
Yes, he did. In fact, I was about to talk about that.
Okay, go for it.
Okay. So SUNY's done a couple of things that weren't designed to help us deal with a pandemic. This is nothing any of us foresaw. But we had launched a couple of initiatives that have proven helpful in managing the pandemic to date. And one was the Open Education Resources Initiative that Bob just alluded to. It's something that was launched by Governor Cuomo back in 2018, and it earmarked $8 million in funding for both the SUNY and CUNY systems to implement OER services. I can't speak for what's happened on the CUNY side of things. And for those of you who are wondering, CUNY is the City University of New York, which is a separate entity from the State University of New York. The State University of New York created an organization called SUNY OER Services, or SOS for short, which has done a lot of really great work getting faculty to both create and use open educational resources content in their courses. In fact, in the first year, OER content was adopted in more than 4,000 classes throughout the SUNY system, with a total of enrollment of more than 100,000 students. So it's something that can have a really huge, and has had a really huge impact. And it was all designed mainly to address concerns about textbook affordability and the impact that issue has on student success. And we've had an added benefit that in this current situation, that it has decreased the reliance on print textbooks and traditional physical reserve services provided by libraries. In fact, we have a lot of libraries who are very, very concerned right now about how they'll be able to provide reserve services during the upcoming fall semester. So having SUNY OER services fully up and running will make it easier for us to address those concerns by possibly shifting a lot of those courses away from a print textbook to a open, free, online textbook. And also I want to point out that SUNY OER services staff were able to really quickly step in and provide a lot of training and support for faculty who needed to move to online classes, like things as simple as teaching faculty how to use Zoom to hold classes. So the OER initiative has been a godsend during this current crisis. And another thing that SUNY has done is we implemented Alma and Primo in the summer of 2019, which gives us a truly shared library services platform for the SUNY system for the very first time. And to help support that shared library services platform, an organization called SUNY Library Shared Services was created. That I am part of that organization. And our purpose is to provide centralized support to all of the libraries in SUNY. And what we've been able to do is, like, having this centralized support has made it easier for us to provide centralized training and assistance with things like emergency closing procedures, stuff as simple as, you know, extending loan periods or adjusting policies to better reflect what's actually happening in our libraries right now. And SLSS staff has also been able to help our libraries take advantage of offers from publishers and vendors, like temporary free access to online content. And particularly one thing I've personally been involved a lot in is helping libraries take advantage of Rapid ILL's offer for free article borrowing through the COVID-19 pod. Between SUNY OER services and SUNY Library Shared Services, having those two organizations in place has really, really helped us manage this current crisis.
Tim, thank you so much. The reason I'm stalling is because we've done one slide and we've got 41 questions already. It's
wow.
Yeah. I'm trying to work out how best to do this. So we have two more slides, and we're going to go through them as swiftly as we can, and then we'll tackle the questions. I think what we're going to have to do is panelists, when you're not speaking, if you can just surf through the Q&A and see if there are any questions that we can answer very briefly. Then we'll give those as brief an answer, even if it's 1 or 2 word answers like, are you serious? Are people really using WebEx to speak to librarians? If that's the answer, if the answer is yes, then let's just give that. But we've got a lot of questions. Let's move on. Tim, I'm going to call you up, and we're going to go in reverse order now. Tim, so moving forward, what are the top 1 or 2 lessons that you learned from experience? Something insightful.
Sure. I think one thing that, I don't know if we really learned this from the current situation, but it's really been a good reminder that not all of our students have, it's not a given that they can go home and go online and do their coursework. The popularity of computer labs and laptop lending programs really shows how reliant many students were on libraries for computer and internet access. And now that the vast majority of our libraries are closed, we can't provide those services to those students anymore. So they're in a bit of a bad way, particularly students who live in the more rural parts of New York. And keep in mind, I mean, I know most people, when they think of New York, they think of the city, but New York's a large state, which is largely rural. So there are a lot of students who simply don't have the resources needed to engage in online learning. And to help address that, SUNY's chancellor recently announced the distribution of more than 8,800 laptops to students to help them complete their spring coursework. But this is only the beginning of a solution to this. It's something that I think going forward we'll need to think about a lot more, making sure that all of our students have online access wherever they are. Another thing that's come up for us a lot is questions about copyright and fair use. A lot of people wanting to know how the concept of fair use can and should be reinterpreted in light of what's currently happening with COVID-19. We get a lot of questions like, how many chapters from a book can I copy now? Is it okay to copy more than one? And can I post these to electronic reserves? And many folks would argue that this pandemic does allow for a more liberal interpretation of fair use. But unfortunately, when you start talking about fair use, you're getting into some really concerning legal areas. It's something a lot of people have a really hard time talking about openly and freely because of the potential for to be held legally liable for what you're doing. And one thing that I've definitely learned is that there's definitely a need for more centralized guidance on this particular issue from the system as a whole. And it's something we were already working on before all of this happened, but it's a good reminder that we really need to step up our efforts in that area.
Got it. Thank you so much. Dennis.
Well, moving forward, I mean, probably the most important thing is that we needed, 3 things: planning, preparation, and practice. And we certainly hadn't planned for anything of this duration, but we had some ideas that were adaptable. The preparation was kind of forced on us, so we just had to put in those 12 and 14-hour days and get it done. And we obviously had no time for practice. I would say that I think going forward, one of the things that we're going to do, even once this is over, is probably once or twice a year, just turn the library off as a physical location and turn on the online component and just make everybody use that, and so we can test the system, so we can practice. The library staff, we have to keep up our skills in doing all of this. Obviously, faculty need to as well in terms of their online work and things. So I think that's that's an important aspect of one of the things that I've learned from this experience. Secondly, I really think that it's vital to remember that the staff is going through this along with everyone else. I made a point to check in or have my leadership check in with every single staff member regularly, not just about the job, but be sure that there are any personal needs that we could help them with and attend to, because they're only going to be able to do their job as well as they're emotionally and physically able to cope with all of this themselves. And so they're people like everyone else. And so taking care of the staff and really being concerned about them, I think, is one of the things that I've learned from this. Maybe an aside is just the greater cooperation with our other departments on the campus, our IT department. I noticed, probably because I've never looked at it before, we had computer labs with a bunch of old desktop machines, which are pretty useless in a situation like this. So I've suggested we switch to, when we replace them with laptops that are locked into their docking station. So something like this happens again, we can just turn keys and have a large number of laptops available that we can, disseminate to students or to whatever. Those are really the big things. I really, when we're done with this, we're going to have some sort of after action plan meeting and go through and see what could we have done better, what do we need to do in the future, and make that part of the planning, and then prepare, and then you have to practice, because there might be a hurricane, there might be an earthquake, depending on the part of the country you're from. Practice makes perfect in all of this. And if your staff in your library don't practice these things just in real time, I think you are missing out on a good opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dennis. Elijah, sir.
Well, we've learned quite a bit, and we're learning as we go forward, too. I mentioned that we have this hurricane master plan that we utilize to quickly pivot to this environment. We've also found that the one drawback to that hurricane master plan, usually when a hurricane goes through, it's a relatively short duration of time, and so the need for remote work or the need for remote teaching and learning for any of our institutions is limited. We've never seen something that has lasted this long as a result of a hurricane or other natural disaster. So I think that one of the things that we're learning is it's one thing to be able to make this pivot for either a handful of institutions for a week or two. It's an entirely different thing to do it for all 40 institutions and the large number of students, faculty, and staff that we serve for a matter of months and without a clear end in sight. So when we get to the end of this, we also will be doing some review work to determine what should we do differently if something like this happens again. Another thing that we've learned is in the use of our technology, and it's been pretty interesting from my perspective and for my team to see how this has happened. On the one hand, our organization is spread out across 3 different offices in 3 different cities. We're in Tallahassee, we're in Pensacola, we're in Gainesville, and we do have some staff who always work remotely. So I sort of naively thought, well, we do this sort of work on a regular basis anyway. We do many of our meetings through some sort of web interface, through some sort of web conferencing. So this ought to be pretty easy for us to just make this pivot to everyone working from home. And of course, the thing that surprised all of us for the first few days was the instability of the platforms that we'd come to rely upon for that kind of work. I quickly discovered that we just couldn't count on some of those platforms for our meetings, and especially for some of the critical meetings that we had. So we had to make a quick pivot to identify other platforms, and more importantly, make sure that everyone understood how to use them. We had one platform that we had typically used for our staff meetings for a couple of years that everyone was familiar with, but in the first week or so, that platform was not reliable. We did have access to another platform that seemed to be a bit more robust, but staff were not familiar with the interface and they weren't familiar with how to use it. So that's another lesson learned, is to make sure that internally that we've identified all of our technology options that can be utilized for an event like this and made sure that all of our staff are fully trained on those. So there's a technology question involved in this as well. But then I think, from my perspective so far, the most important thing, and this echoes what Dennis was just talking about, the most important part of this that we need to learn from is how an event like this affects our staff. What are the long-term effects on our staff of having to work remotely, from being separated from their colleagues who every day on a day-to-day basis they can step across the hall or to the other side of the building to ask a question or to have a quick chat or just say hello and good morning? How does isolation affect us at work? One of the ways that a friend of mine suggested to me to help accommodate just the need for connection and some sort of emotional connection with our staff in the way that we have on the average working day in the face-to-face environment, we're doing a virtual coffee break 2 to 3 times a week where we just have a half an hour set aside in one of our online web conferencing platforms for people to just step in, step out. If they want to just step in and say hi and leave, if they want to stay for the entire break, maybe half an hour or so, that's fine. And there's no agenda, there's no set topics. It really is just sort of that check-in. Hey, how's everybody doing? What are we all doing to cope with this environment? I suggested one day, because, we're all in this environment where we're at home, we have pets in the background, maybe we have children in the background, all these different things that are happening. I said, hey, everybody who's at home, you have your dog or your cat there with you. Let's all say hi to everyone's pets. So all of us who had pets, we put those on the webcam for a moment or two. And, that was some good pet therapy, I think, for the whole group, even if it was done remotely. So from my perspective, the most important lesson that we've learned is to try to identify better ways to manage just the emotional stress on our staff of an event like this.
Well put, Elijah. As we pass the 85th question mark after 2 slides, or we're not even through the second slide, the one question that hasn't come through yet is, there's so much being discussed here, so many ideas. Should we create a document out of this and put it into print and circulate that around? I think I'll discuss with the team back at home and see if we should somehow encapsulate all these ideas. Danuta, why don't you wrap up this slide for us? Lessons learned.
Okay, I'll go quickly on this, just 2 to bring us to an end, and I'm echoing the same as my colleagues have too. And I must say we did not rehearse this ahead of time, so this is really coming to you from all of our hearts. So first lesson, the library staff is definitely a microcosm of society's culture, and it needs care. We've been hearing this. People need to feel that they're heard, connected to others, and have purpose in their work. It's not a cliche to be reminded that we will get through this better together. Focusing on our contribution to the library and its contribution to the university. Then, if we each only think of doing our own tasks and worrying about that. With staff shortages and unlikeliness of filling vacancies quickly, if at all, encouraging staff to take advantage of time to learn new skills or explore new areas of our business is not only good career development advice, but also good organizational contingency planning. Holding all staff Zoom meetings, which we do, allows us to see each other and to break into discussion groups and share experiences and ideas, helping us to feel part of a community where others feel our apprehension and frustrations, as well as our shared satisfaction and gratitude for being able to work. We must feel it's okay to pace ourselves and support each other in what feels to me, at least, like a far more intense, fast-paced, and rather tiring work life than it was when we were on campus. Second lesson, communicating externally what the library does is always important, and certainly in times of upheavals. However, more importantly, to maintain trust with our administrative partners and loyalty among our clients is to meet the challenge to express relevance to their changing needs and stressful demands. With expectations of a high negative economic impact and changes in campus space utilization, higher education administrators everywhere are struggling to make decisions amidst major uncertainties. Against this very complex background, libraries must be able to clarify what among all they do is essential. Not just supportive or even unquestionably always provided, but absolutely necessary to the university mission. However, it may be executed at each of our individual campus. And I must say that's a question that haunts me. My current provost asked, he said, "You do great stuff, but what's really essential?" And that's a tough one. So we have to be able to communicate that well.
Danuta, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Before I switch on to the third and final slide, may I ask the audience if, hopefully not everyone's going to reply, but if you can, I've had a couple of comments about people who'd like to see this webinar transcribed or documented in some way because the presenters are speaking so quickly and covering so much ground in such a short time and using acronyms that not everyone's familiar with. You know, somebody mentioned what is OER, Open Educational Resources, for example. But if you can articulate in a single sentence why that would be a good idea, then I can use that as justification to put some resources aside, try and create a document out of this. I'd appreciate your help in explaining why I need to do that. Okay, final slide of 3. Dennis, run with this. One day, we're going to come out of this. And what are you doing to plan for the great return? And and this reflects some of the questions that have come in already. What does the library look like beyond as a result of what we're going through now? Will anything have changed?
Oh, I think it will. I think the changes are already beginning. I think one of I try to look for the upsides, and I think one of the upsides is that students and faculty are going to realize and experience firsthand the capabilities of the online access that the libraries we've all been providing for some time. You know, the online databases and using the web interface and using the search capabilities. As they see it works, I think we're going to see more and more students, sticking with that and building on it. And I think in the libraries, we need to encourage that and take this as an opportunity for advancement. I'm already planning on a day-long meeting with all the staff and complete, and this may go back to, an old-fashioned idea of when I was a policeman, but what we call an after-action report. Okay, something happened. Let's go through it and examine it, and we need to see what we did, how we could have done it better, to see, did we spend time on things that turned out to not really be necessary? Did we not spend enough time and give attention to things that, caught us by surprise? And so just to be an honest, open conversation among ourselves and then among our partners on the campus, how do we do this? How do we do this next time? There'll be a next time. I mean, I'm old enough to remember having to go down to the American Legion Hall and get our sugar cube of polio vaccine, and they had a list and checked it twice. This isn't the last time we're going to have an emergency like this. One of the important things I think is also we'll be looking at our user data from our system, from our online resources, and see what was successful and what wasn't, and did we adequately prepare students and faculty to make the most use of what we have? And I think that's going to be a point of discussion and moving forward. And also, we'll survey the faculty to see what their impressions were and see how we could have supported them better. What were their needs? What did they miss out on? You obviously have different kinds of faculty concerns, whether it's labs, whether it's online learning and resources, and how do they keep track of if students are actually reading the stuff they've put online. So we're going to look at all of those things and really come out, I think, with a good detailed report that we can then emulate around the campus.
Fantastic. Danuta, you're the one who told me that you and your organization has, 97% was electronics, so it's already remotely accessible by online students. So explain to me how anything's going to be different when you go back.
Oh, Bob, you like to twist the question around what I prepared for. But let's see if my answer will try to give a little bit of insight into this. Because I looked at this question more from the part of how are we going about it. So Dennis gave a nice thing of after the fact, what we can do to learn from it. I'm going to we're really struggling with what to do ahead of time. So at Drexel Libraries, we too have been trying different ways to get our heads around what will influence decisions to plan changes in our work. So looking to a possible possible return to campus, whether in summer, maybe in fall, has begun just this past week to parallel campus discussions around this next phase. Figuring out a way to plan in itself is helpful, as it provides a sort of mental proxy to feeling that we just might have a little control amidst all the unknown forces that are affecting our future. We're beginning to imagine scenarios that project current knowns and worst possibilities. So I'll share a few elements of this strategy as we're approaching planning to return to campus. Not that we have all the answers, but just sort of how we're beginning to think about it. No one expects that a return will be, as the old film said, to the way we were. And so this also is an opportunity to think short term, but with a longer term planning horizon. We invite and review ideas from faculty and student stakeholders, library staff, and academic leadership. So we seek from our liaison librarians, for example, use cases of behaviors they observe among students and faculty. This week, with help from a couple of faculty, we are drafting a survey to understand what dependencies on the libraries are most important to their work and the university's success. Librarians are good at counting what we can. Nowadays, we track data on what our clients most use. By comparison with past year's activities, we look at where folks have adjusted to the absence of services that require on-campus presence. So not surprisingly, accessing our e-resources, as you projected, is the highest use of the library's offerings. Yet it's hard to tell if a drop in the numbers of requests for ILL or digitizing or streaming physical materials will continue when we are on campus again. A review of Google Analytics on the access to our websites uncovered a spike in lookups of our staff directory, and we can only speculate if that might be a desire to contact our experts, an engagement that has a very different flavor when we're on campus. To analyze the insights and visions about the future, we're considering what drivers to use for developing and evaluating the future scenarios. Planning how the library might return to operations in fall, for example, may require us to make some assumptions on whether the negative fiscal impact will be high or low. There will be there, but how bad might it be? And whether the term will begin before or after a vaccine, or at least that fast testing will be available. Or if we should plan for open or limited numbers of people allowed in our facilities. Further into the horizon, we may wish to know whether essential dependencies for the libraries will be to serve deeply by discipline or broadly for our core responsibilities. Looking at extremes, do we focus more on being a service provider or more on being an enabler? For example, do we realign resources more toward providing educational services for convenience and productivity? For example, by operating mini collections like reserve services, some of you are worrying about, or by giving individual class instructions, or by creating customized guides for each class that requests one? Or do we build tools, partnerships, and infrastructure to nurture self-directed growth in mastering information literacy and effective navigation of the info landscape, building confidence and skills in our clients? For example, by recording our class presentations and making them widely available, helping faculty develop and embed learning objects in the curriculum, or creating extracurricular exercises and events, or investing in more licensed access to scholarly resources. I expect that how the libraries returns to the campus will be a result of picking out what people expect of what we did well that required on-campus presence, offering spaces for students to learn alone, in groups, and amidst others, without distractions, with access to staff, stable internet connections, and equipment they might not have at home, with the ability to have physical formats of information resources easily available through access that's on a shelf behind the desk or delivered from other libraries. That's what many of us really miss. It is yet to be seen how much of what we have been offering remotely will be viewed as an adequate, if not perhaps better, delivery venue. Answering that question requires engaging not only our faculty, students, and staff, but also our administrators in figuring out how we align our resources to do so in the new fiscal settings that we can certainly predict will be different. Thanks.
Wow, Danuta, thank you so much. It's humbling seeing some of these questions coming in. I mean, actually, one was not even a question, it was a comment from one public library. Amy, thank you for your comment here, that as a public library, they worked with their local school district to make sure that the people in need had Chromebooks and laptops, but what they didn't plan on was the number of cars that would drive into the parking lot to use the internet access. It's really quite eye-opening. Tim, the Great Return, take it away.
Sure. And I just want to apologize. The road outside of my house is being resurfaced at the moment, and they're making a ton of noise out there. So if you can hear that, I'm sorry.
Are they wearing masks?
Actually, you know what? A lot of them aren't, and it's kind of disheartening. But
okay.
So the SUNY system is anticipating that classes will remain largely online through the fall 2020 semester, which means we're going to have a lot of students who will be taking classes, but they won't necessarily be close to their home campus. Because keep in mind, New York is a deceptively large state, and to drive from, say, New York City to Buffalo, that's a 6 or 7 hour drive. So one thing that we've done is we've made some policy changes that will make it easier for students to receive face-to-face services from any SUNY campus, because we do have 60 campuses spread throughout the state. So all of our students are located relatively close to maybe not their SUNY campus, but at least a SUNY campus. So we've made some policy changes that will allow users to, for instance, like a student from Buffalo who happens to be living in the Albany area could potentially go to the university at Albany instead of the university at Buffalo and receive interlibrary loan services, or return a book that they've checked out from Buffalo to Albany, and then Albany will ship that book back to Buffalo for them. And we're also hoping to make some similar arrangements with the CUNY system. So all of our students from the New York City area will have good options for receiving face-to-face library services, because even though we anticipate classes staying online through the fall, we do think at least some of our buildings will be reopened by then and will be providing at least some face-to-face services. And we're also starting to have system-wide conversations on how you can reopen a building yet still maintain social distancing guidelines. We're using a lot of open online forums for people to share ideas and concerns. And we're also really ramping up ramping up our efforts in the area of shared collection development, because everyone in SUNY is anticipating significant budget cuts in the coming year. So making sure that our dollars are spent as wisely as possible and go as far as they can, we're really trying to coordinate purchasing centrally so libraries can save money.
Thank you, Tim. Elijah, wrap it up for me, please, sir.
Absolutely. So the less happy thought is exactly a theme that others have touched on, is the concern about what the future budgets are going to look like. So again, FALSC is a consortium. We're working directly with the libraries, but we're funded by the state of Florida. Our funding comes directly from the Florida legislature. So we're already thinking about what is the future going to look like in terms of budgetary funding, and we're making plans based on different scenarios. In a backhanded sort of way, this may actually pan out for the good for us, because the funding that's allocated for the electronic resources that we provide for all 40 institutions has remained flat for several years. So this situation has placed a new emphasis on the use of and the need for those electronic resources. I feel quite confident we'll have an incredible spike in usage, and we can take that data forward to the state legislature to make the presentation to say, we not only do we need to maintain the level of funding we have now, we need increased funding for these resources, especially as we go forward with a renewed emphasis on remote and online learning. These electronic resources are going to be critical to the success of our students. So in two ways, we're planning for potential cuts in the budget, but two, we're planning to use data that we're collecting at the moment, hopefully to achieve an increase in some lines of funding. So that's the less happy side of this, but a little bit more entertaining way that I look at it in the shorter term of how we start to work with the libraries that we service. They begin to reintroduce some on-campus presence. I kind of think of it like trying to do a waltz with 40 different dance partners. partners, because they're all going to do this differently, and we're going to have to be responsive in different ways for each institution depending on what actions they choose to take and the timing that they implement those actions and so forth. So we're trying to be nimble, be as nimble in responding to the return to campus as we were in responding to the need to swiftly pivot to remote learning. So it will be a challenge. I have a magic 8-ball, Bob, but it's notoriously unreliable, so it hasn't given me any answers yet.
Oh, you're as good as predicting as anyone. Thank you so much, Elijah. I'm going to ask my panelists, just shout out any answers. I'm giving you about a minute and a half. If you see any questions that you think there are very short answers, just shout out the abbreviated question, abbreviated answer for the benefits of people. So look through the Q&A and shout out. By the way, this is being recorded. Everyone will get a copy. So if you heard music over the speakers or if you heard clicking in the background, hopefully you'll be getting a clean copy soon. Anyone with Q&A?
I'll make a quick comment.
Question.
Go for it, Danica.
Sorry? Yeah, just a quick one. I'm scanning this, and it's so overwhelming how many there are. So thank you so much for engaging with us. But I see a number of people asking for some sort of, sharing our notes and all, and I want to apologize publicly. I know I was speaking fast because we were trying to pack in so much. So if anybody wants any of this, and I really will urge Bob and the others working on organizing this, we'd be happy to draft something that could be shareable in a readed format as well. So thanks for the encouragement that some of our ideas are helpful to you.
Excellent. Next one. Anyone else?
I will, actually, if I may, I'll tackle a quick question here. This sparks a thought with me. So the question from our colleague is, after this relatively successful experience of working remotely, do you think there would be a change in working routines? I do anticipate that. I think for my organization, we've done exceptionally well with all of our staff working remotely. We have over 40 staff members. And I'm already hearing some comments from my colleagues that, hey, we should do more of this. So I do have an anticipation that as we move forward after this is all over, we will have some conversations about either limited work from home arrangements for staff or maybe even more permanent work from home arrangements. And frankly, I have no objection to that. This experience has proven that it can be done and done very well.
Anyone else? Thank you. Dennis, would you like to share your answer on Leganto? Someone said that at the time it didn't seem cost effective, but I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, we were the only school in the UNC system to obtain Leganto, and some people looked askance at me, I think, a bit. In terms
you probably have to give a 10-second background on what it is, what it does for you.
Yeah, Leganto is the reading solution interface. It basically connects the library system with Canvas or Blackboard or whatever your learning management tool is, and it has the ability to search through all of the databases and things you've already signed up for and connect, links to the readings to the Canvas page for that particular class. It's got a lot of really, really useful analytic tools for faculty to use once they get the hang of it and begin to see. Like I said, I had confidence in the product. I just thought it was a good thing for us to looking forward, and it just turned out that in the happenstance of life that with this virus epidemic, it came in handy. We had something ready to work and to assist the faculty and the students to make their online learning experience better. And and Bob didn't pay me for this, but I am glad I made that decision, and I think it's a solid solution for many, many of the new things we're going to see online.
Thank you for sharing that, Dennis. Much appreciated. As I wrap up, listen, there's too many questions, and I'm going to have to spend half a lifetime documenting this up, which I will do. I know my boss is going to tell me to, so I may as well do it voluntarily. I'd like to wrap up with a personal question to any panelists that would like to offer it. We're all coached to be positive, but deep down it is tough. You've touched on a lot of human elements in your answers, but for for the many people on the line right now, how do you keep going? Anyone?
I start my morning with taking 2 cans of fried beans and using them when I try to do stretch exercises that never before did I do.
Excellent. Next.
Well, I backpack as a hobby, and so on the Appalachian Trail, you have everything you have, and you're not going to get to where you're going except 1 foot at a time. And so that's important. The other thing is backpacking, we have people called trail angels who will leave a bag of goodies or leave something useful behind for the next hiker along. And I think you help, one of the things besides, faith and your religious beliefs, whatever that may be, helping other people and getting your eyesight off of yourself always helps you get through, along the way. I found that anyway.
Well put. Elijah, Tim?
I'll echo that, because we work at a remove from students in this consortial environment. We're not directly interacting with students. I remind my staff regularly that even though we're not directly interacting with students, the work that we do is critical to helping those 1.3 million students and faculty and staff at these 40 institutions be successful in their goals, whatever those goals may be. And we know that for many of them, their entry into the higher education system is their pathway out of poverty. It's their pathway for their family to go out of poverty. It's their pathway to the success of their future for both them as an individual and for their families. And I remind my staff regularly that that's why we show up for work. We don't show up to make sure the catalog works. We don't show up to make sure that the databases are accessible. We don't show up to make sure the courier service is working. We show up to work to make sure that all of those people have the tools that they need to be successful in that endeavor. And the work that we do now, I remind my staff, is more critical in that regard than it's ever been. So it's sort of echoing what Dennis said about keeping your eyes on other people and how our work makes a positive impact on those people's lives is critical to getting us through a situation like this.
Beautiful. Tim?
And I just want to add on to what Dennis says. I live along the northern stretch of the Appalachian Trail, and I found that just being able to get outside, granted you can do so safely and responsibly, has really made this a lot easier for me. Also just like stress relief tactics, like I have a habit of throwing a baseball up against the barn wall just to burn off some excess energy. In fact, I was joking prior to the session starting that I'm probably going to need Tommy John surgery by the time this is all over, because I think I'm going to throw my arm out. But yeah, that's what's been working for me.
Lovely. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you to our presenters and their institutions, Drexel, FALSC, UNC, Pembroke, and SUNY, for giving them the opportunity to share their experiences honestly and openly for the greater good. And on behalf of Ex Libris and Library Journal, we wish you all very well. Thank you and goodbye.